Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters. We are so glad that you joined in tonight for another installment, or what we refer to as episode of Insight. Insight is a program that was really not even my own limited intelligence, but by the Spirit of God who has given me this kind of programming where we can acknowledge and to be able to show and to expose even more people, and particularly clergy, who have worked in various communities and who have been an inspiration to people, not only in their congregations, but in their community. Insight is designed to speak on various issues: social, political, theological. It's stimulating intellectual themes and conversations that are very important. In the time of this where we're living in now, these programs that I've seen even across social media have allowed us, and quite frankly have forced us, to be creative in many ways. And so with all of that, we are glad to be here on tonight. And my guest, brothers and sisters, this evening is one of my dear friends, the pastor of the Bedford Central Presbyterian Church, Dr. Clive E. Neal, who is a brother and a friend, and who is someone that I have respect over the course of the years, which is really, quite frankly, coming up on 32 years, and I'll get to that in a second. Dr. Neal, so good to see you on tonight.
Good to see you, sir. Good to see you. Always good to see you. Looking
Yes,
good.
sir.
Like your colors. Like your colors, sir.
Thank you, sir. How Dr. Neal and I met, the first meeting, I believe it was at the home of Dr. William Augustus Jones, late Dr. William Augustus Jones, who had invited a few preachers. For me, I had just got to Bethlehem. I think Dr. Neal might have been there a year or two prior to, I'm not sure, but he invited us to his house. It was also Reverend Dr. Victor Hall, another preacher named Wayne Stokeland. The rest I don't remember, but I remember Dr. Neal. And so as a result of that, his genuine cordiality and personality was very, very noticeable. And the fact that we both shared a Good Friday platform at the Bethany Baptist Church where Dr. Jones invited us. And ever since that time, I felt compelled to invite Dr. Neal to be at the Bethlehem Nation. And I can tell you that my family and the Bethlehem Nation loves Dr. Neal. They really do. They love him. And so I'm glad that he is with us on tonight. Pastor, good to see you once again.
Good to see you, sir. Good to see you.
Now, let me just ask you this, Pastor. Considering the emphasis of what is going on in Black history, which we mean worldwide, and we refer to as the African diaspora. The African diaspora, for those who are not clear, is a dispersing of people of African descent all over the world. And so we regard that in many ways. And so with that, how has the effect of history affected you personally in terms of how important the vote is growing up in the Mandeville, Jamaica, and shaped your thinking? How did that do that?
Oh, one of the irony of growing up in the Caribbean, particularly in Jamaica, and then coming to the States, is the variety in terms of how we look at history. As a young man growing up, I learned world history. It wasn't Jamaican history only, or it wasn't just Black history, it was world history. I remember even in sixth grade, had to know all the 50 states in America. So it was a much broader concept of history that we grew up with. So there was never a Black History Month. There was never an emphasis on Black history. All we knew was world history. But coming to the United States after college, I encountered the reality and why it's important to celebrate Black history in this country. Jamaica has its own issues in terms of classism, but not in terms of racism when it comes on to color here. So I wasn't exposed to the great Black writers in America until I came to America and got exposed to the great Black writers that I was exposed to when I arrived here in America. But upon my arrival, I got very engaged very quickly in the reality because I became a victim of the American racism very early as a soccer player.
Oh man. So Dr. Neal, which kind of brings me to the other point, because one of your degrees, and please correct me as we go, is in psychology. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So
yes.
So you're able to preach to a people, you're able to witness to a people, you're able to teach a people, and you're able to observe a people.
Yes, sir.
And so
one of the beauty in, go ahead.
Go right ahead, Pastor.
One of the beauty of ministry that we are involved with, if we're going to do a meaningful job of what we do, you need to understand how people think, how behaviors are formed. You need to understand how character development occurs. And so in my pursuit of psychology, all those became very important at that time, knowing I was going to go into ministry. But because of the background to which I was exposed both in psychology and biology, I was able to take care not only of the physical, but also of the mental when it comes on to working with people there. So my psychology background became very, very effective in how I approach ministry and how I deal with people, because we are in the people business. You have to know people in order to effectively deal. Are you hearing me?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, yes. So, so the important issue here is that both psychology and biology played a very crucial part in how I look at ministry. Very crucial part.
Very good. Now, I noticed there's a particular picture of you, whether it's in your office, I think it's in your office, of you and the late President Nelson Mandela. What was that like, to be in his presence, knowing full well what he meant to the world and what he meant to people all over the world, and not just, of course, Black people, but people all over the world? What was it like to be in his presence?
Wow. You know, it was in June of 1990 that some of us were asked, pastors from around the country, including Bill Augustus Jones, Wyatt T. Walker, Reverend Brown from California, there, Jesse Jackson. We were asked to go to South Africa to meet with Mandela there. There was always an on again, off again, whether or not we're going to have a chance to meet him. So when they agreed for us to meet with him, it was 6:30 in the morning, 6:30, very, very early. There he wakes up very early in the morning, and so we were asked to meet with him. Be honest, in the for him, because the class which he himself, you feel outside of your relationship with Christ, you were in the presence of somebody great.
Yeah.
You know, just the aura. He's very deliberate with his words. He speaks very clearly and concisely. He thinks before he speaks. So we were on tiptoe expectancy for every word that Mandela was about to say there. But the experience was one of the greatest moments beyond my salvation It's the greatest moment in my life to stand in the presence of a man with such conviction, a man with such commitment, and a man with such dignity. It was an out-of-body experience, as I could say.
Wow, wow, wow. Let me ask you this, Dr. Neal, and considering we talked about Nelson Mandela, who came from South Africa, I'm segueing to this discussion for a moment. And of course, we'll get back to the rest. In Nigeria, Africa, at this present time, there seems to be a shutdown in one of the major cities called Lagos, as it relates to police brutality, which is so interesting. That mirrors what's happening over here, but probably mirroring. And I'm also thinking that what is happening in Nigeria, West Africa, I think is happening in a lot of places on the continent that has not been exposed or has not been shared by the media. Share your thoughts on that as what's going on in Nigeria, West Africa.
The world has become a small place via technology. There have always been abusive situations all over the world, but the invention of the cell phone, the iPad, has exposed the brutality. I think the greater issue, though, Reverend Camp, is the militarization of the police force across the world. Initially, their purpose was to guide, to lead, to build relationship with the community, and because of the increase in weaponry, they now see themselves as military and see themselves much more in a militaristic way than to see themselves as guiding, leading the community in which they serve. And so Nigeria is just one of the many examples across the world to show the impact of Black Lives Matters that occurred in this country, trading across the world. We saw it in France, in Czech, all these rising up because of the realities. This mentality of police forces across the world is how they are trained, the equipment they have is really.
I think we froze just a bit, Dr. Neal. I think we froze just a bit, and we're going to get back to you real soon. Now, we just froze just for a moment. Can you hear me, Dr. Neal?
I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, very good. We just froze for a moment there.
Okay.
Now, let me ask you this. How is the study of biology, which is another thing that you have studied over the course of your life, added to your life and ministry?
Oh boy, biology is really the study of life.
Right.
Talking here about the body, but also how the body function. Is really understanding that there are systems in life, and that we are all interconnected. The cells make up the tissues make up the organ make up the system. That's what biology really teaches us. The same principle is true of the economic system, true of the financial system, true of the social system. Whatever, we would argue, Reverend Kemp, that life is really about systems. There's family systems.
Yeah.
There are cultural systems. And so what biology did for me was to remind me that we are intertwined, we are interconnected, that if one organ is not working, it affects how a system in the body doesn't work. The same thing is true of the church. If one aspect of the church is not working, it infiltrates every aspect of the church, And you'll be surprised that the men, you're always trying to get the very system in the church to work, because it's only one body.
Right.
And the eye cannot say, I don't need the foot, or the foot cannot say, I don't need the hand. It's one system. So biology reminds us that life is about understanding the system that we are part of, and how to allow that system to work effectively.
That is a very powerful point, and that is a very powerful description that you made. So it would also suggest that if these things do not work together, there's a wounding in that particular system. So
Yes.
if in some cases, if there are those in church who do not wish to work with that system, it's pretty much an infection.
You're correct. If a person in the church decided that they're not going to work with a particular system, or they undermine that system, or to play games with that system, it affects the entire body and become infectious. We know what happened in churches when one person decide they're going to sabotage the ministry.
Yeah.
And it's always good to draw people on the negative side than to draw persons on the positive side. And they become infectious, and that disease can cause a dis-ease into the body of Christ.
I guess and what makes it even more dangerous is that when they know that they may be causing those infections, they continue to do it anyway, which is quite demonic in every sense of the word. But that's an interesting point that you brought up, Dr.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now let me ask you this. Speak from what you observe of the times that we are in. COVID-19. We also realize the social unbalance that is taking place in our country, and I've always said that we're on the brink of, or if we're not right now, in the midst of a second civil war in this country. The first one was, of course, was North and South, but it was actually Americans fighting Americans over either for or against slavery. But this is also civil war in all of its inhabitants who are in this country. Could you give me speak to that in these times as it relates to it?
Well, I think time is in which we are living, Dr. Kemp, is a reminder to each one of us, in a very real sense, that that change is needed. A change is needed. And if I could speak particularly of the country in which we now reside in America, America has never confronted its evil. Never confronted its evil. You saw how in Rwanda, which I had the chance to visit, I saw it in Germany with the markers all over Germany. I saw it in South Africa, that they paused for a while and said something damaging, dangerous happened in our country. We have got to stop and confront it, and then start to build stones on how we can get to the other side. In South Africa, they formed the Commission on Reconciliation. In Rwanda, they did the same thing. In Germany, they grapple. You can't go to Germany and walk 100 yards and don't see a marker to remind them of the atrocity that took place in Germany here. In our country, we have buried it. And anything that gets buried, if truth pushed to ground, will rise again.
Yes.
And our lack of confronting what we have gone through in this country, it just caused a new generation to say, we have had enough. And because of the lack of leadership, because of the lack of understanding that we need to sit down with each other and take some responsibility of what happened, to the people who came from Africa in this country, and make a deliberate attempt to address it before they want to move on without going back, and you can't do that. The lynching that has occurred, the brutality that has occurred, the racism. One final thing, what happened in that woman's mind in Central Park a few months ago that would cause her to believe she had the right to know that if she called the police, that the police would come and take her side? that's in her DNA, that we, in which they believe there's a privilege that is innate to who they are as a white person. That's dangerous.
Yes, yes. My guest this evening, Reverend Dr. Clive Neal, the pastor of the Bedford Central Church in Brooklyn, who really is one of the great minds and who are, again, that I admire. We have a Zelle account for those of you, brothers and sisters, whatever financial gift that you could certainly relay to Pastor Neal. Please look at that. You see the CN, which is of Clive E. Neal, at optimumline.net, and to be a blessing to him. Now, what I want to ask you this, Dr. Neal, how long have you been in ministry overall, and how long at the Bedford Central Church?
Oh, I've been in ministry going on 35 years, and at Bedford Central for 31 years. I was in the South Bronx for nearly 4 years at the Tremont Presbyterian Church, and then I came to Bedford Central in 1988, and have been there ever since. So I'm in my 31st year at Bedford Central.
So my numbers were correct when we got invited to Dr. Jones' house. You had already been to Brooklyn for 1 year, and I had just arrived at Bedford.
1 year.
Yeah,
1 year. Yeah.
That's absolutely right.
Brand new.
I'm thankful to God for that friendship, but I really am. So now, I noticed something that you do at your church, which is very, very helpful. You have an exercise program going on. Exercise with the congregation and for people who want to follow on social media. How does it impress the minds and attitudes of the congregation to be involved? And not only the congregation, the community as well. Because I know you as an individual, you've always exercised over the course of the years, as long as I've known you. How does that impress upon the minds and attitudes of the people?
Well, I think it's just a combination of how I attempt to do ministry. I always use the word, I do holistic ministry.
Yes.
You address the mind, you address the body, you address the spirit there, because that's how God made us. Love the Lord with your heart, your soul, your mind, neighbors as yourself. That we are spiritual beings who are living in a body.
Yes.
Here, and we have a responsibility as much as possible to protect the body. Sometimes we make a mistake as churches to emphasize so much the spirit, and we ought to emphasize the spirit, but we negate the importance of maintaining the body. And every one of us know that if the body is not functioning, it affects our spirit.
Yes.
So what I've decided to do in my church is to make sure that we address the entire body. We address the mind, we address the spirit, but also address, and especially in light of COVID, where people are locked up in their homes, and the danger is because we are locked up, we have a tendency of eating more and so forth, so it can become self-destructive. Is to allow the technology that we have to enable us to connect with people in their homes and do what we can twice a week to get the people involved in some aspect. Just as we are doing the spiritual several times a week, and the Bible study and the worship, we also want to take care of the physical here. So it's part of my holistic aspect of community, people, exercise, food, spirit, all those components, political, are always important to how I look at ministry.
The holistic ministry is very important. My daughters often remind me when how much they enjoyed seeing you at the African Festival. And there were some African drums being played, and you were dancing, and they just really they gravitated towards you with that. And it shows that holistic part is very important, because some people of the mindset that as long as they do with spiritual, almost meaning neglecting of their body, the Lord will take care of me. But then we have an obligation to take care of ourselves in many ways, considering exercise and considering our bodies to be a help to ourselves as well as be a help to everyone else. A woman in my church once said to me years ago, we're all going to die of something, but it doesn't mean you have to help it along. I never forgot that. So that speaks very well of the holistic point. Now, let me ask you this. Now, Dr. Neal, you read a lot, and books that you have read. What books would you recommend to not just clergy, but to laity as well? And they don't necessarily, I mean, it's I know that you're going to name some as relates to theological thinking, but all books doesn't necessarily have to be theological. That's part of it. But there are other books as well. What books would you recommend for clergy and laity?
Yeah, and if we go back, hopefully, I won't get in trouble. I'm going to recommend the Bible. I don't want to get in trouble that I didn't recommend the Bible at all. But there has been some classic over the years, and then there's some recent. Just grab it easily here, going back to Richard Niebuhr, Christ and Culture is one of the great classic, Christ and Culture here, Packer book, Packer's book on knowing God, one of the great classic here. I'm a big fan of C.S. Lewis, School Tape Letters, Mere Christianity. I'm a big fan. Of course, the classic Pilgrim Progress, all those great books that we have all read over the years that we love so much and we always read. But there are other books. Who Moved My Cheese? Is a recent book that a great book. Who Moved My Cheese is a great book on leadership, on understanding how things function. There's a book called Grit. Sticks have a book called Grit. Just the word itself, Grit, is another great book that we can all be exposed to. John, we have talked about Rick Warren's book, Purpose Driven Life. That start a whole movement across the country there. The Purpose Driven Life, one of the great classic here. As a pastor, James Cone book, The Black Theology, was a major book for me growing up there. So they are. Maybe the final book I recommend for maybe a young preacher is 7 Habits, Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Is another great book here. I just read a book last year that really stands out. Start with your why. If you know why you do what you do, then you will always be motivated when the challenges and the obstacles come, because you have got to know why. Start with your why. Another great book that I have. Start with your why. That's Nick's book. Start with your why. So so I'm a reader, but just a lot of books, that is there that we can always tap into as persons, but also as a pastor that makes a big difference.
People from the Bethlehem Nation, and I've asked that question of everyone that I've interviewed, what were the books, and to my pleasant return on that is that there are people from Bethlehem Nation write down the books and they write down the author. So they've been doing that for a while. I mean, just recently, the Reverend Tisha Dixon Williams, who passes out in Bridgehampton, she thinks that I should make an insight syllabus for every book that was mentioned, to put that on a syllabus up the road. So I got to go back and look at each interview to do that. I mean, but they have, the people at the Bethlehem Nation have been really said how much they love the books that you suggested, and certainly the books that you talked about. I'm glad you brought up James Cone, and I'm gonna tell you the reason why, because everyone mentions James Cone. When I first started dating Mrs. Camp, she has a library of books, and one of the books was James Cone. Yeah. But James Cone, for me personally, I love his writing, but he's become, people have made him a polarizing figure in the clergy community. They say that Cone does not really have, he's not really a theologian. And they'll use statements like, preach the real Bible as if Cone is not. And I think that is a concern, certainly of the future. But again, at the same time, we can say we leave it into the Lord's hand. But the thinking of clergy who reject Cone, and those of us like yourself and myself, we embrace Cone for what he gives. And we embrace Cone because theologically, he's really sharp on point. And the other reason, especially here in New York, is that there were many Black people who were not ready to embrace Christianity because it didn't speak to them. How do you see that, Dr. Neal, as it relates to how Cone is so effective in that way?
You know, and I was at Princeton Seminary when I got exposed to Cone. It was at Union at that time, came down and spoke to us. I love James Cone books he's written because everything happened in context. You know, you can't lose your context. You know, he came out at a crucial time when people were asking questions. You know, it happened in South America. Gutierrez was asking the same question in South America. It happened in Asian theology, people here, and China was asking the same question: where is God in their culture? You know, because something happened. If we are honest about it, that the Jesus picture of Michelangelo that we all embrace is not the Jesus of the Bible. And so people will begin to ask the question across the world in theological school, just like women began to ask in terms of imagery, you know, where is how does the scripture address our struggle, our issues in context? And so James Cone, I believe, came at a crucial time. It wasn't popular, and we don't need to be popular. All you got to do is to have conviction and do what God called you to do. He came at a critical time to address the context of the African experience in terms of how he sees scripture. And I thought he did a great job based on his resources of building a systematic theology of how our culture can be seen in scripture. And so I embrace him, I use him, it becomes a scholar in my book of how we can reinterpret the Bible for our context here. So I'm a big fan of James Cone, Howard Washington, Cornel West.
Cornel West, yes, sir.
I'm a big fan of those guys.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And Kane Felder.
That's right. Kane Felder,
at Howard University.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this. Besides COVID-19, what changes do you see in the world and ministry today, or transitions? What do you see for the future?
You know, I think the technology is going to be with us forever. The increasing technology, the advancements of technology is going to be with us forever. It's going to force us into isolation. The fact is that we have become comfortable with our, it's amazing, we call them iPad and iPhone, so we have become very comfortable with these instruments there. I think we may have to rethink what community is going to be for us in the future. We have to rethink community. We have to even rethink what friends are, because we have misused the word friends. 400 friends, 4,000 friends on Facebook. Here we use the word followers, on Instagram. These are all terms that we in terms original intent these words are supposed to be. So I think the challenge we're going to have is how do we recreate community for us here? How do we recreate a friendship for each one of us here? How do we stay in touch with people that we care about, because outside of COVID, technology can move us into tremendous isolation. dysfunctional, extremely dysfunctional. They come out to families and friends because we're going to get accustomed to isolation and individualism in the future. That's going to be a big struggle for us here. And so the church's message will maybe that we have to recreate not so much large communities, but maybe small communities.
And that's interesting. You should say that, Dr. Neal, because even in news forums and even some movies that are produced on cable or Netflix certainly become even more creative because they know that people are shut in.
Yeah.
And I think there's no question that there's some nonsense on there, but there's some really rich. I just saw something the other day that I lived through, and that was the Chicago 7. And what I remembered about the trial of Chicago 7 is Bobby Seale, who was one of the 7, and Bobby Seale often said, "I'm not with these guys." And he was trying to defend himself. They strapped him in a chair, gagged him, and he had nothing to say in his defense. And that is something that's a story. There are books on it, but that hasn't even been done in movie form. Yeah. And so now with many movie houses closing up, Netflix is getting real rich because they take those movies and bring them on their television program. So I think that's really speaks to the point when you said we have become more isolated, and yet at the same time we see some creativity, but we also see some crazy stuff out there too. I mean, but it does allow for creativity to come in. Now, considering what you have been through and seen, even because I tune in at the Bedford Central Church, I see the worship experience. I see you preaching. What is the most pressing thing that you can, and if not, it don't have to be the most, but one of the most pressing things that is important to you, or any subject that you feel you should be teaching on, or that you feel you would place teaching on at this time?
Oh boy.
Now, you know, these questions are not hard, Dr. Neal. I mean,
No, it's not hard, but I think what we have a message, and we have got to hold on to the message that we have, but we have got to redefine the methods by which we convey our message. Yeah. Here. And so the word that came to my mind is change or adaptability. We have got to remain adaptable and be open to change if we're going to stay relevant in the world in which we live here. And so one of the hardest things for America churches to do is to change, because change is hard. Because change comes out of thinking, comes out of habit, comes out of behavior, comes out of character development. It's a process to unchange, particularly the way we think here. So I think the biggest challenge that I think I'm facing, and I'm not talking about a new kind of ministry after COVID. I'm talking about just that everything changed here, and so unless we are willing to adapt, message remains the same, but unless we are willing to adapt new ways of looking at all things, we're going to be left behind. And so I'm trying to, right now I'm doing a series on change for the whole month of October. We're talking about change because the church that we left in March will not be the church we're coming back to for Lives of Spirit, hopefully next year. So much, we have seen so much, experienced so much. And so we have got to be able to use the power of the message that we bring, but package it with a new mindset that God's going to create amongst us.
Wow. I'm glad you said that, because about the church not returning to what they normally do. And that has been a difficult transition for all of us, there's no doubt. But you have to move up and move along to try to create this atmosphere of transition. Now, Dr. Neal, say a word about this election. In other words, everyone is saying how important it is. It's the aftermath of the election that I'm concerned about, no matter who wins. Will the country be different as an extension to this transition? Or would the country be different as a reaction to who does not get in?
You know, I'm one of those persons from the old school, I use that word intentionally, about leadership. You know, leadership is so crucial, no matter what happened after the election. And we saw that with President Obama in his leadership there, because, you know, although he was right now wave, he was the right person at the right time to deal with the right issues here. So I think, I would say whoever wins, because we have seen the manifestation of how one person is bent already. But if there's a change in leadership, it all depends on the ability of the leader to pull together a variety of mindset together to address the issue. And if they're able to raise the bar and the quality of their leadership, then people will, because people have the ability to rise at the time of great leadership. We have this tremendous ability, as Obama did. So if you can raise the standard here and create a sense of hope for the future and organize around it and give people access to the resources of the country, I think something powerful can happen after the election. It doesn't always have to be an expectation of disaster. It can be an expectation of hope. So I'm going to go with the hope dimension because we are hoping that the kind of leader will come that will propel us into a new dimension, because we have seen the worst. You know, we are hoping for better.
Now you're still a young man, by the way, but when you were a younger man and a younger preacher coming up, what advice would you give to preachers, young preachers coming up today? What advice would you give them in terms of entering into ministry? What advice would you?
For those who are coming up, you know, you and I have, you know, been around for a little while. I'm going to pray for those who are coming behind us.
Yeah.
It's going to be a different world in terms of how you do ministry. People are not impressed anymore by buildings. The days of buildings are over. What people are looking for are meaningful relationships. And so I would advocate for any young pastor that they become multi-dimensional. They got to be multi-dimensional now. The gospel have to be pivotal, but character development is crucial. Who you are when no one is watching. You got to build your character, because your character will only take us so far, but no further. You know, so character development is crucial there. And I would suggest that, you know, one of the things I think I didn't know I would do that much in ministry is construction. That there's a business part to ministry that nobody told us about. We thought if we just go out there and preach the gospel, that would take care of the church. No, there's a major part in terms of the business. Understand how business function, understand dimension. Sometimes we should all get an MBA as a pastor. The construction, to understand construction and what is involved in construction here. All those, you know, understand the community and the dynamics of the community in which we pastor there, because you become a community relationship person here. But also you have to genuinely love people, because I believe there's no job as complex as pastoring. It is a complex job. You get it from every possible angle. When a doctor gives up, they say, call your priest or call your pastor.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, you know, so that's how complex the job which we do here. But I think the more grounded we are, you know, I would say to a young pastor, make sure that you are deeply grounded in your. Make sure that you have a personal, I'm not trying to be pietistic here, but I'm saying make sure you really have a relationship to the God that you talk about. Not just being altruistic, not just because you love people, but make sure you know personally. And out of that character development, then you're able then to love people and begin to do ministry on a different level here. But you have got to be able to stay relevant to the community in which
My
you
guest
worship.
tonight, Dr. Clive E. Neal, pastor of the Bedford Central Presbyterian Church, who again is one of the great minds. I wanted to ask you, Dr. Neal, when you talked about the complex of pastoring, I know you understand it, and there are people who are viewing understand that, but then there are people who may not know what those complexes are. Give us like an example of the complexities of pastoring.
In any given day, for the average pastor, you can go through 6 or 7 different emotions. Here, the high and lows of life. You can be called in the morning, a member has a baby. Here, you celebrate with that family. A second call comes in, one of your leaders die. So here goes another emotion. Then something happened in the community to which you have to respond to as a leader, because people see you as a leader in that community here. Then people have a housing issue. You have to relate on how to deal with the housing issue in your community. Then when your young people in your church have a problem at school, and you may have to go and address the principal or the teacher. That's one day. You go through these various experiences.
So it's a lot to do with so many various emotions as well, which can also collide in one day.
One day.
Yeah. Wow. Let me just ask this, Dr. Neal. In the 30, well, more years than that, but certainly 31 years at Bedford Central Presbyterian, which is, I don't even know whether that's Bedford Stuyvesant or Crown Heights any longer. I always thought they were the same. How has the community, if it has, how has that changed around you? I know we have the whole thing of gentrification, but how has that changed in some ways around the church, and how has that transitioned the community to which Bedford Central is?
Change it, the lines. We are in Crown Heights, and we have gone through a major housing boom in the Crown Heights area that has impacted every aspect of our community, from the stores that are now in the neighborhood. We have the Starbucks. Here we have these wonderful grocery stores that have come in. Here we have a lot of bars and restaurants that have moved into the neighborhood there. So it's a different kind of a neighborhood. And so the question becomes, how does it impact those who are moving in the community have very, very small allegiance to church.
Yeah.
Not much allegiance at all to church. They
Okay, Pastor, can you hear me? I know you froze for a second.
60% is what. You can hear me?
I can hear you, Dr. Neal. I can hear you.
Yes.
I can
So
hear you.
I
I can
was
hear you
saying,
now. Yes,
uh,
sir.
that,
Okay. Um,
okay.
doc-
Yeah.
you go right ahead, Dr. Neal. You were finishing up. Go right ahead.
Yeah. No, yeah, I was just saying how the community has changed, but the impact for the future of the church is going to be very, very, unless we find ways to engage those who are residents in the community, our church is going to experience a major, major downturn in terms of membership. And that's why, you know, our technology, because we have been never reached before via technology, maybe that maybe speak up the residents in the community may have to go because they won't physically come, but they will engage us in technological if we are willing to offer some of the services that they stand in need of in the community. So it's a challenge. It's very challenging, but
yes,
go ahead.
I want to thank the staff of Insight, my administrative assistant, Ms. Linda Atkinson Kendall, my son-in-law now, Reverend Derek Jackson, who was just ordained this past Sunday, who does the technology and the filming, to my daughter Asia, who makes sure that all flyers are developed and sent out, and to my daughter Niger, who directs me how to sit, directs me how to move my head, and all those other kind of things that go with that. Dr. Neal, thank you so much. And before you go, I want to say that our guest next week will be Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. He will be on Insight next week, and so please keep that in mind as the congressman becomes our guest. And then, of course, following him will be Elder J.D. Williams from the St. John's Baptist Church in Far Rockaway. We're going to be talking after election, so that's going to be pretty interesting. Pastor Neal, are there any final words and final instructions as we close out? Dr. Neal, are there any final instructions that you can give us as we close out? Final words of encouragement as we close out this evening, and then, of course, after those words, you give us a word of prayer. Unmute your mic, Pastor.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I would just tell people to stay on the path. Whatever we are going through, He who have begun a work in us is doing it for a reason. And there's some lessons we're all going to learn through this experience that's going to hopefully is going to broaden our ministry. Nothing is wasted. Whatever we have gone through, God can use it to impact the kingdom. And God specializes in using just one. And so whatever you have gone through, whatever I've gone through, is for a reason. Nothing is wasted when it comes on to God. So if you're feeling discouraged, stay on the path, keep your focus, keep your head up, because God's going to use you in some some incredible ways in the future as we move ahead. So I feel encouraged, and I love you, brother. Stay strong. Stay strong.
Bless you, my friend. Thank you so much for being a part of this, Dr. Neal. I'm going to be asking you to come on here again up the road because you certainly have a creative way and a creative mind for ministry. And I'll be tuning in, even if I'm exercising from my chair. God bless you, brothers and sisters. Brothers and sisters, see you next week. Do not forget that you send something to the email for Zelle and to be a blessing to Dr. Neal. He's a friend, Bethlehem. I know you love him. Let's be a blessing to him and thank him for his word. God bless you, my friend.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Be well.
Okay. Thank you.